Amy, we are so excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So I want to just dive right in because I'm really excited about your research because of the second edition of our book, Bigger Love. We've been working on that now for a number of months, and it will be launching in 2019. And just to give you and our audience an idea of why we're doing a second edition of the book is because we wrote the whole book, He Said, She Said, and it's all about our experience and what we learned, which is great. But then we started diving into research about the topics that we had discussed in the book. And so we decided to add a they say section to each of the different chapters that are relevant. And we have ended up reading and citing so much of your work, especially in chapter 4, which is our sex chapter. And we're huge proponents of just what we call just say yes, which is the idea that anytime anyone of us want to have sex, we just say yes. And that works really, really well in our relationship. And we've also tried to convince other couples to try that as an experiment. And I cite your research a lot with regards to this just say yes kind of concept. And I wondered if you would talk a little bit about this topic and your work, your research.
Sure. I think what you're talking about is the work on what I call sexual communal strength. So what that means is if you're high in sexual communal strength, you're motivated to meet your partner's sexual needs. So, it matters to you what your partner's interested in. You try to understand that, and you do try to be responsive to those needs. And so this is similar to an idea that Dan Savage has talked about on his podcast, which is GGG, so being good, giving, and game. So good in bed, giving of time and pleasure, and then game for anything within reason. So generally, I do think about it somewhat in that way, that like you should, if a partner shares a sexual need or interest with you, showing responsiveness to that is a good thing. I will put like a little asterisk or a little caveat on that, that sexual communal strength can also involve, being understanding when your partner's not in the mood. So we've looked at this particularly during the transition to parenthood, a time when couples tend to have more stark differences in their interest in sex. And we do find that even above and beyond this idea of sexual communal strength, like being responsive to those sexual needs, there is a key role of being understanding about disinterest at times. And it also turns out that if just say yes sort of isn't possible for whatever reason, there are ways that you can very responsively decline your partner's advances that can still maintain your satisfaction. So I like this idea of sort of having, when a partner shares a sexual need, I'm really trying to understand what that need is and being open to it, being responsive to it, at least show them that you acknowledge it, even if you're not going to always meet it. And then with the caveat that, that can also be understanding about disinterest. And there's also ways to, say no to something where you can still really keep your partner's feelings and needs intact.
So what's totally interesting about that is one of the things I learned, and we talk about this all the time, but I used to ask 10 times because I know she'd probably only agree once. And when we did our experiment, it becomes like an avoidance of rejection too at some point. So when we did our experiment, I became way more in tune with not asking when, you know what I mean? Way more in tune with that approach of meeting her need of her not being in the mood, because I know that when I ask for it, she's going to say yes.